This is the SAU Report, a program featuring interviews with the faculty, staff, students, and alumni of Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia.
Welcome, I'm Lori Porter.
And I'm Adrienne Lawton.
Dr. Ball, the Vice President of Academic Affairs, is our guest for the SAU Report today. Hi, Dr. Ball, how are you?
Hello, Lori, I'm fine, thanks.
Dr. Ball, where are you originally from? Where did you grow up?
This is a family show, and the word original I'll overlook. I'm from the state of Missouri, a little town called Kirksville. Grew up there, left when I was 21, and still consider Missouri my home state. Although currently Magnolia is my home.
Where did you go to college?
Well, I went three places: Northeast Missouri State University, Duke University, and the University of Northern Colorado. Each place I was fortunate enough to get a degree.
What was one of the first things that you learned about yourself when you went off to college?
Mom didn't get me up in time to go to school. I had to set my own alarm clock and be responsible for washing clothes and getting food and getting my studies done.
Can you give us a little information about your educational background, some of the classes you took, what your majors were?
Well, I majored primarily in the sciences, biology and chemistry. I spent some time catching snakes in the swamps of North Carolina, a lot of time in chemistry laboratories, but science is an area that I had an intrinsic love for.
When you were studying science, did you know you wanted to go into the educational background?
You know, I didn't. I was working at a hospital in a laboratory, taking blood from patients and doing blood counts and urinalyses and things like that, and that's where, I guess, where I really became interested in science.
Did you experiment when you were a little kid with science?
No, I didn't. I was more of the athletic type. I was going to be a professional baseball player or a professional musician or some glamorous, so-called glamorous profession in those days.
So
science didn't hit me until I was 18.
So why did it hit you? When did it hit you?
Well, if I have to come up with a reason, I guess it's probably my mother. She always, I have four brothers, and she always wanted us to do well, do good in the world, and I suppose she was the driving force in making us go to college, and I think she secretly wanted us all to be doctors, but I don't know that for sure. She never would admit it.
Well, we also know that you have several books and papers published. Can you tell us a little bit about these publications?
Well, most of them are professional. I have my favorite one, probably hasn't done much to change the world, but it's still my favorite, and it's apropos today. It was written in 1977, and it's called Restructuring and Augmenting Educational Patterns. And it's a spoof on our language and our jargon and our doublespeak. And in today's world, doublespeak seems to be an in thing. So I'm kind of proud of that little one-page story. You might want to read it sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Why did you become a teacher? I know that you're, interested in science. Why did you get into the education?
I think it was just a natural progression. Teaching made me feel good, made me feel a sense of accomplishment. You can't take that necessarily to the bank, but I felt good by working with children and students, and that's the reason.
You've taught at different schools. Is there one you prefer, high school students, college students?
No, I just like to teach. I still consider myself a teacher of sorts. I can always get better. I'm probably not as good now as I used to be, but with a little more practice, maybe I'll get back the old touch and the old charm.
If they gave you a choice of teaching a class here, would you teach that class?
Well, I do teach a class occasionally. I teach the honors seminar here for our freshmen, and I've offered to help the School of Education with some teaching, and they've accommodated me a couple years ago and allowed me to teach a class. Maybe they'll do it again in the future.
Well, with the future teachers that we have coming out of this school, what's some advice that you can give them that they can expect from their first year of teaching?
Well, advice, it'll be exhilarating and hard at the same time. Be prepared to for the unexpected. because that's the beauty and the joy of teaching. It's always the unexpected. So just be prepared for that. Be able to say, I don't know.
Many schools now are flooded over with gangs and violent 6-year-olds that carry guns and that kind of thing. How would you explain to somebody maybe how to handle that from day to day in the teaching field?
Well, you know, our schools mirror our society when it comes to societal problems. They're in the schools. My personal belief is that we need to try to address those at a very early, young age, and particularly get the parents involved. Parental involvement in the schools could do a lot to help that, I think.
Do you think that's a lot of the problem now, is the parental involvement? You know, so many of them have 2 jobs and...
Lack of parental involvement is probably a main cause. It may not be the only one, but there are a lot of external influences on our children today that capture their time and their imagination and their souls. And we need to help direct that as much as we can, and there's no better teacher than a parent, because the teaching comes from within, from a parent.
Exactly right.
As you know, a lot of campuses or schools have police officers now there. How do you think this affects the children and the teachers?
Well, we're talking about public schools and universities, or public schools?
Public schools.
Well, I think it's probably a necessary evil. I'm sorry we have to have law enforcement in our schools, but it's a protective device so that learning can take place in as much as possible. It affects the teachers probably in the fact that they feel more secure, more safe, so they can do the job.
Do you think they're necessary? Do you think the teachers can't handle it by themselves?
I think if we had parents in the schools instead of the police, we'd be much better off.
I agree.
Now, how we do that is another issue, another story. But
Do you think that all of the violence in the schools is turning people off from wanting to be a teacher in the education field? I mean, I know that if it was me, that it would probably turn me off. I don't think I would want to be in there with a violent, 6-year-old, 18-year-old.
well, I think probably the media, you folks, maybe sensationalize a little bit of the violence and corruption in the schools. Those things do happen, probably not as much as the newspapers and the media say it does, but we do have problems there. What was your question?
My question was, do you think it's turning off people from wanting to go into the education field?
No, I don't think so. I think once the student in training, the student teacher, goes into public schools and gets out early on in their career, they'll see that it's a safe environment for the most part. Now, there are occasional problems. It could have turned off some, but not very many.
Why do you feel, I know that there's the lack of parental involvement, but what else do you feel would cause such disciplinary actions that we have with our kids these days? Is it drugs?
Well, you're asking for opinions now. Let me give you a few that you may not agree with. When I was a child, we had to do a lot of work, and we were occupied with productive kinds of work, early, late, weekends, Saturdays, and we didn't have time to get in trouble. Now, today there are lots of, like I said earlier, lots of opportunities for children, students to do things other than work. The work of a young child is play. Now, we can structure that play to help them be better children growing up, and that'll spill over into the adolescent areas too. But we need probably to direct our children toward more productive kinds of activities and maybe a little more discipline.
Do you think the community could help in the productive? I know that, we have a boys club and that kind of thing, but a lot of times parents can't get the children there because of work or school or whatever. Do you think there would be any other kind of programs that maybe the community, maybe the college could help develop?
Well, there's been some discussion here about setting up child care centers on campus for students and faculty and staff and even the community. We've been a little reluctant to do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, we feel that the community does have child care facilities, etc. We don't want to be in a competitive arena with our local folks. But yes, I think there's always room for improvement, and I think the communities, in fact, we are doing some things here in Magnolia. I was just meeting a few days ago with the deputy district attorney and the superintendent of schools, talking about how we might do some cooperative things to help reduce truancy and maybe some delinquency in our young adults and young children, and we're pursuing that now.
I just think there's a lot of college students that would be happy to give their time, to teach these children art or just play, football with them. And I wondered if, that was a possibility.
Yes, it's amazing. We have a student body of 2,600 students here, and it's essentially a free labor workforce if we want to take advantage of it. And there are a lot of wonderful students here that could be in loco parents, parents in place of the real ones for a certain period of the day or the week. So I would encourage students to take some initiative and volunteer. Maybe encourage faculty to encourage students to volunteer. Maybe do some things cooperatively that way.
As far as jobs, teaching jobs, do you think it's more difficult to get a teaching job now than it was, say, 10 years ago?
It could be. There are lots of different kinds of teaching jobs and a lot of different locations for teaching jobs. It wouldn't be difficult to get a job in, for example, a large city or inner city. They're begging for teachers.
Do you know about our area here?
In Columbia County, Magnolia, I think anytime you have a university in a town or a county, the competition will be keen for those jobs because we have a lot of professional people here that will compete for them. So it's going to be a tougher road in a county such as Columbia that has a university. The further away you get from university, the easier it will be to get a teaching job.
Right.
Why did you choose to come to SAU? What about Magnolia or SAU stick out?
Well, I've since learned that my perceptions were accurate and that this is a special place. The town is a vibrant, small community with a lot of caring people. There's not the mean-spiritedness here that I've experienced in other places of the world. The campus is totally dedicated to student learning. When I came for an interview, the people treated me nicer than I deserved, and probably that's the reason, the people and the way they treated me.
As far as the students, I don't think most students know exactly what you do as the VP of Academic Affairs. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
I sign a lot of things.
Yeah.
There are probably two answers to that. For my colleagues out who might be watching or listening, my main job is to protect the integrity of the degree, or the degrees, the baccalaureate degree. I can talk about that a little bit if you like, but probably what you want to hear is I try to hire good people, good faculty, good staff in my area and help them be successful in their jobs. Those are two things I do, and then we can get more detail if you want.
When you are hiring faculty for our university, do you find that you have lots of qualified applicants, or do you search out teachers, or how do you go about hiring someone?
We do a lot of things, and it depends on the discipline. There's a shortage in some areas and a surplus of faculty in other areas. We start with a committee. A committee is appointed to do a search. That committee makes a recommendation to the dean, department chair and dean, and then who in turn makes a recommendation to me. Each of us interviews the candidates. I take personal effort, as does President Gamble, to interview all faculty applicants so that we can maybe learn a little more about them before the recommendation comes forth.
And it seems to me that the teachers that are here have been here for a long time.
I wonder why that is.
I don't know, but to add new faculty, is it that when we're expanding, or is it when they retire, or do we expand very often? Have we hired on very many teachers for new classes?
The size of faculty depends on the size of enrollment for the most part. There'll be shifts in enrollment. You know, nursing will get big one decade and be small the next, and so on. But people that come here, like I came, we, for the most part, are happy. We think it's a nice place to live and raise our families, and we have a tendency to want to stay. But there's turnover. Since I've been here 5 years. We have 130 faculty. In the last 5 years, we've hired over 60. Now, some of those positions have been filled 2 or 3 times. In some of the high demand areas, like one position has been filled 3 different times in 5 years. But We have over 45 new faculty that were not here when I came 5 years ago, and that's over a third of the faculty in 5 years. So there is turnover.
I know this is probably a hard question for you to answer, but since the teachers have been here so long, how do you think that affects the students? I think in some ways it might be good, in some ways it might be bad.
I think it's probably a combination. There are some disadvantages of not enough turnover in the faculty, but there are some real wonderful advantages for them being here too. There's a love in this faculty of the institution and of the students that you don't see in a lot of places. The faculty take pride in their work, they take pride in the accomplishments of their students, and they have that intrinsic reward that I talked about earlier, and that's one of the reasons I went into teaching. And I think that can be said about a lot of our faculty, and certainly the majority of our faculty.
What are some of the challenging aspects of your job, some of the most challenging parts?
I suppose I get to solve problems that other people can't solve below me, or that serve under me, the deans and the chairs and the faculty. Those are always challenges. One humorous little story that happened, I think is humorous, at least it was to me after the fact. We have a rodeo, and we had a father lend us or give us 4 rodeo bulls for practice purposes for a team. And one of the bulls got out. And been out a week, and been out 2 weeks, and been out 3 weeks. And the local law enforcement agencies were assisting us in trying to corral the bull. And that was a rather humorous kind of solution, or a problem that I was asked to help solve. And being in academic affairs, corralling bulls, particularly one of my skills or strong points, but that was you're asked sometimes to do a lot of interesting things.
Is on campus, how did you perceive the combining of the art department and the music department into Brinson?
Well, as I reflect back on that, it's probably the right thing to do. If we had unlimited resources in another building to house the music department, probably that would have been okay too. But we all learn from each other, and I think the music students and the art students will benefit from that close arrangement. That's an arrangement on a lot of campuses in this country, and so I don't really see a major problem. It's at the time a little stressful. Anytime you try to make change, sometimes the stress clouds the mission, but I think things are working out very well now.
I know that was a sore spot with faculty and the students. Have you had any feedback from the faculty? Have they said to you how it's going?
Yes, I've had some good positive feedback, particularly from the music faculty. They've called me on more than one occasion and told me that the building is working out very well. They're very pleased to be there, and one of the concerns was the sound with the music and the art, and that has been essentially solved. It will be completely solved by summer. So I feel good about that.
Do you think when there are changes on campus, do you think that the faculty listens to the students? The voices, I mean, there are many people that have voices, and
well, we do our very best to try to communicate and continue good communication among students and faculty, between faculty and students, and sometimes it just doesn't get there the way it should. People hear different things. They don't say what they mean or mean what they say sometimes. Articulation is difficult, particularly when you have different constituencies. People look at things from different perspectives, but communication is always a problem in our society, and that's no exception on a campus. Faculty tend to be smarter than administrators, and they're deeper thinkers than those of us that are in administration, and they maybe tend to analyze things a little more deeply than some of us, and that's the nature of being a professor. That's why we have them here. They're the minds of the institution.
I know that lately I've heard some talk around campus about the absent policy.
Absentee policy?
Absentee
or
policy.
absence policy? Okay.
Absentee policy. They seem to say that, this is their education, they're paying for it, they should be able to come when they want to come. Why can't they just be absent and get the grade that they get? And it seems to me that a lot of teachers have taken on this very strict policy. With 3 absences, they get they have a letter sent to their home, and then it's supposed to be sent to the dean. Can you comment on that?
I suppose if a college student's education was paid for entirely by the college student, they would have a good complaint and gripe about that. But about 1/3 of the cost of the education is paid for and borne by the student. Even if you're not on scholarship or on financial aid, 1/3 of the cost is paid by the student, 2/3 paid by other sources, the taxpayer, other folks. And so we feel an obligation to the state, to the taxpayers, to try to spend their money wisely, and students aren't going to learn as much out of class if they're there, quite frankly. And so I support an attendance policy, but I hope the students understand that even though tuition, can be cumbersome and it's hard to pay back sometimes when you have loans and you have to work, there are other people paying for your education too.
On campus, there are many students that feel that the professors do not respect them as adults. How can maybe students and faculty members come together and respect each other? I mean, do you have any
You guys ask
opinions
hard
on that?
questions. My goodness. Well, sometimes people behave the way they're expected to behave. Sometimes our college students don't behave as adults, and so as a result, they're treated maybe less than they deserve. Again, we'll go back to communication. We need to have dialogue, continuous exchange in Student Government Association, in our Faculty Senate, in our BRAE, one-on-one conversations at the coffee table. We need to talk with each other, and even in classes, and try to learn and respect one another. I remember vaguely, but I remember when I was 18, 20 years old, and I did some things probably that was not considered to be adult.
I'm a student that has to study all the time if I want to keep my grades up.
Good.
But it is even harder when I'm having trouble and a professor won't help me. They don't have time. They have to do this. They have to do that. I have things I have to do too. What is some advice that if I came into your office, what is some advice you would give me?
We have professors that don't help students.
Yeah, well, it's kind of amazing, but we do have some that...
Well, we have a lot of sources of help for students to help them with their academics. Of course, we have an advisor. Each student has an advisor. Our younger students, our freshmen, have peer advisors, peer counselors. We have a free tutoring center on campus. We have supplemental instruction, upper division students that are good in chemistry or majoring in chemistry to help you if you're having difficulty in chemistry, et cetera, algebra, history, whatever it might be. Sometimes students are afraid or fearful just to ask.
What do you think makes a good college president?
Good college president?
A good college president.
Wow. Well, I think we have a good one here at SAU, Steve Gamble's an outstanding president. I think a person that can listen, have a little vision about the future, understands the issues facing education and particularly higher education, and has a plan to make the place better.
What do you feel has been your strongest leadership quality?
Well, I'm fairly patient. I try to be understanding and don't jump to conclusions too quickly. And I try to reflect on the issue before making a decision. Probably those kinds of things would be my strength.
Do you find that students come to see you, or are they intimidated, or?
Sometimes they're lined up. I don't think I intimidate students now. Probably students would say that I do, but I really don't think I do. You'll have to ask students about that.
Do you have a favorite story about your first year of teaching? Favorite story that...
Well, it's kind of a happy and a sad story. There are lots of them. One
course.
that comes to mind, I had this young fellow that came to class and slept. He would fall asleep every day. And it was an irritant to me that a student was not interested in my discipline and my effort to present this, that they would have the gall to fall asleep in my class. And so one day in my weaker moments, at the time you could do this, I grabbed the young man by the shirt and pushed him up against the wall and told him I was going to stomp a mud hole in him, and then I was going to stomp it dry if he didn't stay awake in my class. Today I'd probably be put in jail for that. However, as it turned out, this young man left school at 4 o'clock every day and went to work from 4 o'clock in the evening till midnight. And he was supporting 2 sisters and 2 brothers and his mother. And when I found that out, I was very sheepishly ashamed of my behavior and vowed not to ever do that again. And we came to an agreement that we would try to help him get through the class. And as a matter of fact, he passed with a D in the class, or C or D, I can't remember. And he went on to graduate, and he's now successful in a little town called Hazelwood, Missouri.
Do you think that there are a lot of students here on campus or in high school that those things are put on them where they have to support their family? And how do you think that affects their academic behavior?
Well, certainly it doesn't. If the obligations of a student is more than being a student, if they're a full-time student, being that is a full-time job. Mm-hmm. Now, some people can hold down more than one job, but it's a rare person that can have 2 or 3 full-time jobs. And I consider a 15-hour load, or 16-hour load of a student a 40 to 50-hour a week job. And one of the disappointments is in our public schools, we probably don't ask kids to be as rigorous outside the classroom as they need to be successful in school, in college. So when college students get here for the first time, studying is something foreign to them, and they have to learn that very quickly or be a failure. So it's part of the learning experience.
Do you think that high schools, when a high school student comes here, do you think there's something that their teachers could do to prepare them for the studying? Because I know I was never prepared for that studying part.
Well, let's hopefully we can, we being the university, can work with our public schools and collaborate on how we might prepare, high school teachers might prepare our students to come to post-secondary education. Hopefully we do some of that, but it takes the effort on the part of the students as well, and so probably a combination of both.
In yesterday's Bray, there was an article that stated that it is legal to give the address and name of students to practically anyone who wants it. Do you think that is a violation of privacy for the students? I mean, it says it's legal, but to me, I don't.
Well, there are 2 things there you need to consider. First of all, it's a law. We have to do it. Whether we want to or not, it's a law. We have to provide the public with the names, addresses, and some other information on students. Now, a student, an individual student, can request that that not be given out. And we have that. It's in the catalog. If the student will look, it says that if you wish to not have your name given out, stop by the Student Affairs office and they'll take care of that, so it will not be given out.
What would be the purpose of the public needing to know that knowledge?
Well, I guess the need to know, the right to know. I suppose there are some business motivation behind it. Perhaps I saw where, in the paper at least, selling of credit cards or selling of products or services or goods. It's a law that probably needs to be revisited, in my opinion. But right now we're obligated to obey.
Well, Dr. Ball, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
This has been the SAU Report. I'm Lori Porter.
And I'm Adrienne Lawton.
The SAU Report is a production of broadcast journalism students in the Department of Theater and Mass Communication at Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia.